This is CBN NewsWatch.
And thank you so much for joining us for this first edition of CBN NewsWatch for Monday, September 23rd. I'm Ephraim Graham. Ahead today, President Donald Trump at the United Nations taking on the growing persecution of religious believers, especially Christians, around the world. Democrats in Washington again talking about impeaching the president after a complaint by an intelligence whistleblower. With no clear winner in Israel's second special election in 6 months, the process is underway to determine who will be Israel's next leader. And we're going to show you what life is like for Israelis who live near Gaza, facing attacks from Hamas by rocket and through secret tunnels. All those stories and more are ahead in this edition of CBN NewsWatch. We begin this half hour with President Donald Trump heading to the United Nations today for a 3-day visit during its General Assembly. The centerpiece of this year's UN schedule will be a session today on climate change. The president is skipping that. Instead, he is speaking to a meeting about the worldwide persecution of religious minorities, especially Christians. We're going to have a look at the growing attacks on religious believers in a few moments. The president will also be trying to build a coalition to confront Iran after the U.S. blamed it for the recent strike on an oil field in Saudi Arabia. Back in Washington, Democrats are accusing President Trump of pressuring a foreign leader to investigate presidential challenger Joe Biden. The whole incident has Democrats ramping up their talks of impeachment. President Trump admits he discussed former Vice President Biden with the Ukrainian president, but he denies any wrongdoing. Democrats say there's only one way to find out: release the transcripts of that phone call.
The conversation I had was largely congratulatory, was largely the fact that we don't want our people, like Vice President Biden and his son, creating to the corruption already in the Ukraine.
And our Amber Strong is in our Washington, D.C. bureau and following this story for us. So, Amber, what are Democrats saying the president did wrong here?
Good morning, Ephraim. Yeah, this all goes back to this July 25th conversation between President Trump and the president of the Ukraine, in which, according to the Wall Street Journal, the president pressured the Ukrainian president 8 times to investigate Joe Biden. President Trump's team is saying that Biden, when he was vice president, pressured the Ukrainian government to fire a prosecutor who was looking into Hunter Biden's company. Of course, President Trump says there was no pressure. The Ukrainian foreign minister says there was no pressure, but Democrats say this is just another example of the president using a foreign government to investigate one of his rivals.
So what happens next, and how is this so-called whistleblower involved?
Yeah, so the Democrats are using this to say impeachment again, and the whistleblower comes in because they want to know if this whistleblower complaint coincides with this whole situation. The whistleblower basically is saying that it has something to do with President Trump and a foreign phone call, but we don't know what because the Democrats haven't been able to get their whole hands on the complaint. So they want the complaint, and Nancy Pelosi is not quite on board with this whole impeachment thing, but she is saying that President Trump has until Thursday to at least turn over the whistleblower complaint.
All right, Amber Strong following this story for us today in Washington. Amber, thank you.
Thank you, Ephraim.
With nearly all the votes counted, Israel began the next phase of forming a new government Sunday. But as Chris Mitchell now reports from Jerusalem, it still remains unclear who Israel's next leader will be.
Israeli President Reuven Rivlin met with each party that won seats in the election. He wanted their recommendation of whether Benny Gantz of the Blue and White or Benjamin Netanyahu of the Likud should form the next government before making his decision. So far, it appears Benjamin Netanyahu might have one more recommendation than Benny Gantz and could get the first chance to form a government. After 10 members of the joint list, a combination of Arab parties, recommended Gantz, Netanyahu called in his opponent for a unity government.
Citizens of Israel, it happened just as we warned. The joint list recommended Benny Gantz for prime minister. Now, there are 2 options. One is that a minority government will emerge that relies on those who deny Israel as a Jewish and democratic state and that glorifies terrorists who murder our soldiers and citizens, or that a broad national union government will emerge.
The way ahead for Netanyahu or Gantz is not easy, and it's the numbers that tell the challenging story. Of the 120 seats in Israel's Knesset, a leader needs 61 of those seats to form a government. There are 55 seats on the right aligned with Netanyahu's Likud. On the left, Gantz's Blue and White has 44. But 10 members of the joint list of Arab parties could support Blue and White in a minority coalition. That adds up to 54 seats, but still short of the 61 magic number. That's why Avigdor Lieberman is described as a potential kingmaker. His party holds 8 seats, and he remains uncommitted. Regardless of who is chosen, it may take weeks to get a new government, and it's even possible Israelis could go to the polls for a third time. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Every weekend since June, tens of thousands of people in Hong Kong have been staging protests against their government and the nation of China. The demonstrations are increasingly turning violent, as they did just this past weekend. Our George Thomas is on the scene in Hong Kong with this report.
You know, it's quite remarkable to imagine that more than 24 hours ago, it was a completely different scene here at Shan Tin Mall in Hong Kong. On Sunday, scores of anti-government protesters squared off with riot police at a mall, subway station, and on the streets of Hong Kong's northern town of Sha Tin, in what has become an all-too-familiar scene. For 16 straight weekends, demonstrators took their anger and frustration to the streets, setting barricades on fire and blocking roads. Police responded by charging the crowds, firing tear gas and beating protesters. At one point during the day, demonstrators ripped and trampled on a Chinese flag, provoking an angry response from China's state media, which called the act blasphemy. In one suburb, a more peaceful march brought dozens of people together, singing the U.S. national anthem and holding American flags as they walked the streets. Demonstrators have urged the Trump administration to save Hong Kong from China.
Hong Kong is the forefront of the battle against the totalitarian regime of China, and this is the forefront of the free world. Please support us. Please support us in our fight.
The protests erupted over a controversial extradition law, which would have allowed Hong Kong citizens to be extradited to mainland China. Critics argued those extradited could face human rights abuses. The bill has since been withdrawn, but the protests continue as Hong Kongers push for more freedoms and less control from China. Meanwhile, the former British colony is bracing for potentially more chaos ahead of next Tuesday's 70th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic of China. While the Chinese government will hold massive celebrations, authorities here in Hong Kong are canceling various events, including a major fireworks display that will mark the national holiday on October 1st. George Thomas, CBN News, Hong Kong.
Coming up, President Trump is taking on the issue of religious freedom around the world today at the United Nations. We're going to bring you a look at a report from earlier this year that shows you how people of faith from around the world, especially Christians, are facing increasing persecution. We've got that story for you when we come back. Stay with us.
When I came to Regent University, it's like the world opened up. I felt like I needed to advance my career and go back to school. Regent was a perfect fit for me. The Regent professors are world class. You are equipped. The focus of the faculty is on each individual student, whether it's online or in person. You become a part of Regent's family. You carry with you not just the content and the knowledge, but the confidence to understand that we can be significant in the world.
Regent University. Follow your path.
Get the top political news and analysis from Washington on Faith Nation, tonight at 6 Eastern, only on the CBN News Channel.
Although it doesn't get the headlines, climate change claims, as the president prepares to address the United Nations, there's no question religious persecution is a growing global problem. An annual account by the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom reveals increasingly people of faith are under attack. Jennifer Wishon brings us this story now. She's on Capitol Hill.
If you watch the news, you understand religious persecution is a major problem in countries around the world. And now this new report gives us a better understanding of the world's top offenders.
Those countries include Iran, Russia, and economic powerhouse China.
So here's a rising power. Its economy is growing bigger and bigger each year. Its military is expanding. It's got worldwide ambitions, and every place it reaches, it's bringing these values of persecution along with them.
So-called Tier 2 offenders include Cuba, Iraq, and America's NATO ally Turkey, which held American pastor Andrew Brunson hostage for nearly 2 years.
One of the things the Commission is really focused on is not only when there are governments perpetrating violence, but when governments are tolerating the perpetration of violence.
This report is unique in that the 9 members of the U.S. Commission for International Religious Freedom aren't burdened by diplomacy. Unlike many State Department accounts, these observers tell it like they see it.
We believe as a commission that no person of whatever faith they are should have to fear within their house of worship.
For the world's Christians, the situation is especially dire.
Christians are the most persecuted religious group in the world, and it's accelerating.
The commission calls on President Trump to appoint a special advisor on international religious freedom, sanction top offenders, and put money toward the State Department's effort to help houses of worship protect themselves.
Churches, which are soft targets, have become targets for terrorists. And so we believe that this would be a very effective role for our government to come alongside these governments to provide the training that would be a combination of the police officers, the law enforcement agencies, the domestic security, along with the houses of worship.
For so many people of faith around the world, finding religious tolerance is increasingly a matter of life and death. Jennifer Wishon, CBN News, Capitol Hill.
Still ahead, as Israel works to sort out its next government, one major concern for many Israelis is security, like for the Israelis who live near the Gaza and face danger from rocket strikes, fires, and secret attack tunnels from their next-door neighbor, Hamas. We're going to bring you the story right after this.
Wouldn't it be great if you could just hop on a plane and fly to a third world country and hand out food and medicine to the needy? And wouldn't it be great if some of those people came to know Jesus as their Savior because of your help? And wouldn't it be great if you could help out people like this all around the world every day? Wouldn't that make you feel great? And what if you could do all of this without having to leave your home or write monthly checks? Well, you can. Partner with CBN and you can help spread the gospel all around the world and make it a better place. And when you sign up for Pledge Express, your contribution will be deducted from your bank account every month automatically. It's a safe and simple way to make a difference. Plus, wouldn't it be great to get life-changing teachings every month from Pat and Gordon? When you sign up for Pledge Express, you'll save time and money, and you won't just sit around and watch the world go by. You'll help change it for the glory of God. Now, wouldn't that be great?
When you care, souls are set free. When you give, lives are made new. When you share, eternal life begins. When we all come together to love, miracles happen.
Rocket strikes, fires, and secret attack tunnels. That's the reality of life for Israelis living near the Gaza Strip. CBN's Scott Ross visited the area and talked to the people to bring us this picture of what life is like when Hamas is your next-door neighbor.
Eliyahu McLean lives and works in Israel along the border with Hamas-controlled Gaza Strip.
So we are about 7 miles in this direction from the Gaza border. This is Moshav Yoshivia.
You're in direct line of fire here.
Yes. 3 weeks ago, during the Sabbath, I was just finishing prayers here, and I had just walked home at 10 a.m., and we hear red alert, Tzeva Adom, from this siren. And well, as soon as we heard red alert, in our houses, we have to run to a safe room.
Hamas launched nearly 700 rockets at southern Israel that weekend. How much time do you have?
You basically have about 10 to 15 seconds. Seconds to run into the room that's called a safe room.
Why do you choose to live in this sort of an environment with a family?
First of all of Israel is under rocket threat.
Yeah, but not like this.
Many Israelis have discovered this part of the Holy Land is actually quality of life. A few rockets don't scare us, first of all. We have faith in God, that God is going to protect us. And this is sovereign Israel.
McLean took me to his synagogue, showed me the Torah scrolls, and introduced me to his neighbors. When the situation is tense, he said they sing and dance. McLean introduces visitors to the complicated situation on the border by giving what he calls the Gaza Border Reality Tour. Visitors get a glimpse of the complexities of life on both sides of the border.
And we're looking on the outskirts of the first third of Gaza Strip, looking in the direction of the Mediterranean. And looking to the left, this is already Gaza City. Remember, this is a city of 1 million people, and you're talking in all of Gaza, 2 million people. That is a lot of humanity. You see there's a border fence here.
Yes.
And you see Israeli army lookout posts. And if you look slightly to the left, you can see a mound of earth on the other side. You can see a Hamas lookout post. By the way, wave to Hamas. As we're looking at them, they're looking at us. The enemy is just that close.
Standing along the international border, we could see the Israeli town of Sderot. And just 45 miles up the coast is Israel's second largest city of Tel Aviv. On the map, McLean showed me the reality.
The area in blue are what doesn't exist anymore. This were the Israeli communities, the settlements of Gush Katif. In 2005, the Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon uprooted the 7,000 Israeli in about 23 communities.
Had to uproot everything.
But the tragedy wasn't just the uprooting, but they left behind all of the greenhouses that were top of the world. And the Palestinians from Gaza were working there. They could have maintained it, but Hamas decided to destroy the greenhouses and use it as a launching pads to fire rockets. So it's a little bit of what you call shooting yourself in the foot.
Hamas did the same thing with electricity.
One of the ironies is that in the 2014 Gaza war, Hamas was firing rockets to destroy that power station, which in fact supplies over 30% of the electricity to the same people that they live among.
But McLean says just fighting the terrorists isn't enough.
And you see the dilemma that Israel has these days. Even Hamas, as extreme radical Islamists as they are comparatively the moderates. If we topple them, who will replace them?
The most recent border disruptions for more than a year include massive violent protests and fire kites or balloons. This is one of the kites that
that was sent over the border from Gaza. You can see on the edge, it's a kerosene piece of cloth that they lit on fire. If you look closely, you see the Arabic writing. And this kite, the idea was that it would land in a field or a forest across the Israeli border and light things aflame.
Does it work?
We've lost hundreds of thousands of dollars of agricultural produce.
Whoa.
We've had thousands and tens of thousands of acres of national parkland totally burned to the ground. Sometimes it's in the form of balloons. And you know, it's very hard to tell children, you see balloons in the sky, you want to run after it, that there might be a warhead on the end of the balloon. The idea is that we, on this side, are going to send kites back with a message of peace, that we in Israel didn't come to displace you from a country called Palestine. We came back home to the Holy Land, not to be in a constant war with our neighbors, but to live in peace with our neighbors.
Good overcomes evil.
Good overcomes evil.
Our final stop was one of the fields burned by a kite or a balloon just 2 weeks earlier.
Why is this so important? First of all, this is huge losses to the agricultural sector. Right. This is also a statement that we're in essence going to burn what we can't have for ourselves. And also, it's a statement of desperation that the people there are suffering under a leadership that's squelching freedom on the other side of the border.
Are you hopeful?
Ultimately, out of the ashes comes a new life, a new spirit will emerge. Peace and love will prevail.
Scott Ross for CBN along the Israeli-Gaza border.
Still ahead, we are going to show you what happens to ships from the U.S. Navy after they've been decommissioned and put out of service. We're going to take you to their final resting place in America's largest ship graveyard. It even includes vessels from before the Revolutionary War. We're going to have that for you when we come back. Stay with us.
I am Regent's first ROTC graduate student.
When you give, smiles grow bigger. When you care, homes are happier. When you comfort, the hurt goes away. When we all come together to love, miracles happen.
Check out the CBN News Daily Rundown podcast each weekday with me, Caitlin Burke. Click on the show tab at cbnnews.com where you can listen and subscribe.
Young people, millennials, are flocking to church.
It's not an exaggeration to say that we love to meet them and that we love to know their stories.
So have you wondered where America's naval ships go once they're decommissioned? They're sent to what are called marine sanctuaries. And the newest one, not far from our nation's capital, is home to about 100 World War I era shipwrecks. Gabe LaMonica took a trip to the Ghost Fleet to Mallows Bay to bring their story back to life.
The steel monster behind me is presiding over the skeletons of about 100 wooden ships. Locals around here call them the Ghost Fleet. The guards standing sentry over this ship cemetery are just the tip of the iceberg. Out of the muck, the soft tissue of the ships here start to come into focus. Their spines laid bare at low tide. A boneyard bristling with skeleton.
When I was a kid, that was kind of spooky.
Carl Sharp is an assistant park manager here who's been exploring the ghost ships on these waters for some 50 years.
And back then you could kind of go in between them, and it was like you're looking up and going, oh, and of course there was ghost stories and all that.
During World War I, the War Department commissioned 1,000 wooden steamships for a rush order to build transports faster than German U-boats could sink them. After the war, those leftovers were dumped here.
They burned them down to where the water line was then at the time.
We took a ride with Sharp and park manager James Fedorko to trace the outlines of the fallen ships.
Only very few of them actually ever were used, and most of them just sat where they were built and then moved to the scrap pile.
From the SS Boone, named by Woodrow Wilson's wife in 1918 and scrapped 4 years later, to this new shipwreck, caught in the spine of a 100-year-old predecessor. Hundreds of ships have met their demise on this southern end of the Potomac River.
The history here goes back just where the water sits and how the land is.
Now, nature is taking over this living graveyard, where ghost ships are resurrected for new life.
It's just going back to nature where it came from.
The nation's newest marine sanctuary is also America's largest ship graveyard. Gabe LaMonica, CBN News, Mallows Bay, Maryland.
Time now for your Monday motivation. I leave you with this thought: the favor of God is on your life, and it's not a matter of fair, it's a matter of faith. With that said, I encourage you to walk with and in the favor of God today. Remember, it is indeed yours, and all it takes to activate it is your faith to receive it. You should walk in the favor of God today. It is indeed yours. Well, that will be a wrap for us and this first edition of CBN NewsWatch. Remember, you can always find more of our CBN News programs on the CBN News Channel anytime. You can also check them out online at cbnnews.com. We'd love to know what you think about the stories you've seen here today. Feel free to email us. The address is newswatch@cbn.com. And of course, you can reach out and touch us on Facebook, on Twitter, as well as Instagram. We hope you will make this a marvelous Monday and join us right back here, same time tomorrow. Goodbye, everybody. God bless, and thanks for watching.